You're tuned into the Counterflow Podcast, home of dissident voices,
unapproved opinions.
But you gotta get ready.
You ready?
Now here's your host
and humble narrator,
Buck Johnson. Let's go.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Counterflow Podcast. As always, I am your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson, coming to you once again from Lockhart, Texas. In the midst of Holy Week, we are almost to Pascha, friends. And like I mentioned last week, we're kind of keeping this in the family. We had Father John Whiteford on this week, friend of the show, friend in real life. Father John Whiteford's son-in-law, Ben Dixon, is with us. We're going to be talking about Christian nationalism. Many of you are probably familiar with. What's an Orthodox take on Christian nationalism? I wanted to tell you up front, I'm proud of Ben. He's got a new position, the editor-in-chief of the North American branch of the Union of Orthodox Journalists. Fantastic website, uoj.news. They've got people reporting and doing journalism that are Orthodox, of course, from Albania. Mount Athos has a division. Bulgaria, Germany, Greece, Serbia, Ukraine. They've got even a humor section, a history and culture. Fantastic website. And so Ben has joined up with that organization as the editor-in-chief of the North American branch, which I'm happy about for him and for the organization. He's going to do good work. Of course, you know he leads the Ludwell Orthodox Fellowship over at southernorthodox.org. Fantastic Substack, Where the Wasteland Ends, where he writes, it's one of my favorite Substacks. And he's talked about Christian nationalism and what he would call Christian patriotism, makes a distinction between those two. And we're going to get into why. We're going to get into some talk on Israel, Ukraine, the true church in Ukraine, lots of good stuff. And so, without further ado, welcome back, my friend, Ben Dixon. How are you, sir?
Good, Buck. How are you?
I'm excellent. It's beautiful today. It's basically, well, when this drops, it will be Holy Week. Holy Week is upon us. That's a wonderful thing. We are going to have our first Pascha in the new space, which I assume you've seen online.
Yeah, I have. It's real exciting.
Yeah, it feels like a real church. Like it's like a nice size and everything. But welcome back to the show. I will let you give a quick intro on who you are, what you've been doing, and we are going to talk some Christian nationalism and Christian patriotism and all of these sort of things.
Yeah, so my name's Ben Dixon. Right now, I am the editor-in-chief for the Union of Orthodox Journalists in America, the American branch covering, church life in America. I'm also the operations manager at the Philip Ludwell Foundation and the proud husband of my wife. So,
all good things. What is this new position that you just mentioned up top? What are you? How did that come about, and what do you guys do?
Yeah, so the Union of Orthodox Journalists originally started in Ukraine in 2014, kind of in the run up to the stuff that was going on there politically and with the church. And really, once the schism happened, that's really when things took off. It's a group of laymen from the UOC who kind of got together and wanted to actually report what was going on in the life of the church.
Can you real quick, just so we don't talk over people's heads, UOC and what schism do you mean there?
Yeah, so that's the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. It's the canonical church that has been in Ukraine since, the baptism of Rus in the 10th century. They've been through quite a number of struggles over the centuries. But pretty much there was a couple of very small schismatic groups. And up until 2018, those were universally recognized as schismatics by all the local churches. And then Patriarch Bartholomew, at the behest of the U.S. State Department, decided to go there and have a reunion council in which the reunion was just the schismatics and really no one from the canonical church. And then the Ukrainian state, the post-Maidan government, supported those schismatics, and they've become kind of the state-sponsored church since then. And these schismatics and government have kind of teamed up to persecute the canonical church. And so the UOJ, the Union of Orthodox Journalists, has been there reporting on that. And so if you've seen videos of, churches being raided, all these things, chances are that came from the UOJ or one of our, kind of allied groups, other people trying to get the word out. So
it would be nice if you guys could get a chat with Tucker Carlson lined up, because for those listening, when Tucker, he's mentioned it many times, he's the only big journalist I've heard mention this, that Zelensky and that government is trying to shut down the churches there in Ukraine. That's exactly what Ben's talking about. That's what Tucker's talking about. So he knows about it. And speaking of him, by the way, I don't know if you saw this, but someone with the screenshot of Alex Jones and Tucker together in front of Tucker's bookshelf. Did you see some of the books that he had?
No, I didn't.
Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future,
really?
By Father Seraphim. He has the Orthodox Survival Course, Guide, whatever that one's called, by Father Seraphim. And what is that one I did? It's slipping my mind. GM Davis wrote a book, and I did a podcast on
Antichrist.
it. And yes, he's got that as well. It turns out Father Peter here sent him those, but maybe he's reading them. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that'd be good. We could meet Tucker.
Yes, we definitely could. Is America a Christian nation, or was it ever one? Was it founded as one? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a topic of hot debate.
Yes, it is.
I think you could certainly say that many of the founders were not quite Christian. A lot of them were Freemasons. They were deists. So this idea that there's, God is a grand architect who kind of set the universe in motion and has kind of just let it go from there. Even Thomas Jefferson certainly proclaimed himself as a Christian, but in the Jefferson Bible, which is what congressmen are sworn in on to this day, he had removed any miraculous accounts from the text. And so, what's really left, some moral teachings that are detached from the, reality of God. Now, certainly the people of America have been Christian for most of our history, perhaps heretical sects, different types of Protestants, we would say heretical sects, different Protestant groups, Catholics, etc. But there have also always been Orthodox Christians in America. Obviously, Philip Ludwell, right, in the colonial era, and even wrote the commission in the letter to George Washington, letting know that he had been commissioned of the army. So, there's always been Orthodox throughout, and broadly speaking, the country has been guided by, at least nominally Christian ideas. Those are all heavily influenced by the Enlightenment and the Reformation, but there's this seed of Christianity there. And still to this day, most Americans consider themselves at least nominally Christian. That's obviously on the decline, but the last 5 years, we're starting to see that rebound. And, I think that trend will continue for a little bit.
What are your thoughts? I assume you've had to realize that there seems to be some sort of, like you just kind of alluded to, a move back in that direction. Maybe it's because of my own change, but it seems like when someone would go on TV and say, I'm a Christian, 10 to 15, certainly older than that, many years ago, it was looked upon as a negative. Just to, like I mentioned, Alex Jones and Tucker, just to hear Alex, who I've been listening to since 1999, I suppose, in Austin, he did not speak about spiritual warfare and the things that he sounds almost like he's Orthodox. I know his son's a catechumen, but does it seem like we're moving in a direction that's legitimate? Does it feel like some of this is, as you might call it, false Christianity or squishy, kind of soft Christianity? What are your thoughts on this direction we've gone in?
Yeah, so I think we've kind of touched on this in the past, that for so long, we've tried to hide death in our society, in our culture. You look, there's closed casket funerals, there's no casket funerals, right? This celebration of life stuff. And the one thing about COVID was that it confronted people with death. And you kind of have two types of people in America at this point, right? Those who they confronted death and they saw that the only pathway through death was Christ. And there's others who they just kind of held on for dear life until they could get back to their normal lives. And that's kind of where we're at. You have a ever-growing number of people who saw that Christ was the way and who have since, right? Because the world just hasn't gone back to the way it was, for better or for worse. And so a lot of people have seen Christ, continue to see Christ, and are moving forward. And, for all the bad of orthodoxy online, there's a lot of good, and a lot of people are finding that good and coming to the church. Likewise, a lot of people are finding Catholicism.
Yes.
But a lot of them, when they do, they quickly realize, the emperor has no clothes, right? Like, there's all these problems. And so they end up drifting into orthodoxy as well. And so I think at least for the next decade, you're probably going to continue to see growth. And I think, maybe this is that last great calling back, right, before things really turn for the worse. But we'll see. They're certainly not going well in Europe.
Sheath Underwear has come aboard to sponsor the Counterflow podcast. How about that? At sheathunderwear.com/counterflow, or just go to sheathunderwear.com and use Counterflow at checkout for a discount. Men, do yourselves a favor. Elevate your daily comfort with Sheath Underwear. The innovative dual pouch design provides unparalleled support and separation, ensuring each part of you has the space it deserves. Experience the sophistication, finally, of a design that respects your anatomy. The moisture-wicking technology sets a new standard in comfort. This advanced system not only keeps you cool, which you need when you live in Texas, especially, most times of the year, but it prevents chafing, odor, making every movement feel effortless. So, once again, go to sheathunderwear.com/counterflow or use the promo code Counterflow at checkout. Experience the perfect blend of comfort and functionality with Sheath. Yeah, I want to talk about Christian nationalism in this term. And doing my studies for this, I had heard the term, obviously, for the last several years. I went on someone else's show, and their presupposition is that I was that. I didn't know that until it kind of came up halfway through, and she said, "Wait, you're not a Christian nationalist?" At the time, I said, "I don't honestly even know what that is. I'm an Orthodox Christian. That's what I am." What is this? There seems to be a strain now, maybe a growing strain, if you will. I assume you saw the episode, Father John Whiteford, Jim Jatras, and I critiquing Pastor Joel Webbin. Within the Orrin McIntyre sphere and Pastor Joel Webbin and these guys, Andrew Isker, who I'm friendly with in a group chat, there's this sort of based, I would call it, version of Protestantism, certainly compared to the version I grew up with. It's anti-Zionist Protestantism, which is nice to see at some point. Is that what Christian nationalism is to you? That sort of move? Guys are all right-wing, very proudly. What is that to you, and what does that movement represent?
Well, so I think guys like that, right? It's a move in the right direction for Protestantism, away from this very sensualist, feminine, pseudo-magical evangelicalism that we kind of see most prominently. And so I think it's positive in that aspect. But at the end of the day, right, Protestants cannot break out of that Enlightenment worldview. And, the reason why I make such a distinction between Christian nationalism and Christian patriotism is because nationalism implies the idea of the Westphalian nation state, right? This idea that came out of the end of the religious wars and, this secular national ideal. We reject that as Orthodox Christians, right? The nation is bigger than that. And you see this even in play in the Second World War in the Soviet Union, right? And so a lot of people think, oh, well, Stalin lightened up on the church because he knew that he needed people to fight. The reality is that they were already fighting. And as Stalin said to, I believe it was the American ambassador, he says, we have no illusions that they're fighting for us. They're fighting for Mother Russia. And that concept of Mother Russia, right, isn't, oh, well, the Soviet state. No, it's Russia, the soil from which they were raised, the culture, the language, the church, the faith, all these things of Russianness, right? And that's a more orthodox idea of the nation of the ethnos. And that's what we need to hone in on. And so, I mentioned this in one of my articles, but Metropolitan Filaret of New York of blessed memory, he says, a nationalist ignores what is wrong with his country, and he's just, kind of rah-rah. The Christian, though, cannot do that, right? The Christian has to look at the sins of his nation. He has to call his nation to repentance. He has to himself repent for his nation's sins. And I think that's the difference, right? Is we are looking at the nation in a much more organic sense than the Protestants who, if the United States government fell tomorrow, they wouldn't know what to do, right? Americanism would be done because it's based on this document that's in this weird shrine in Washington, D.C. For us, the American nation is, a continuation of the, that Anglo-Saxon legacy coming from the British Isles, and then, other aspects coming in from the different German and Romance nations, these different Latin and Western nations that have contributed to the American nation as a people.
I heard Pastor Joel Webbin give his definition. It was very simplistic, and I don't mean that as a knock. I think he was doing that to keep it piffy, if you will, or pithy, excuse me. It's like, okay, am I a Christian? Am I a pagan? I'm Christian. The biblical stance is, in his opinion, is to, as he broke it down, is to be a nationalist. And then, like I said, he says, well, I'm a nationalist. Okay, I'm not for globalism, in other words, and I'm a Christian. Therefore, I am a Christian nationalist. What are your thoughts on that version?
Well, I think like everything with Protestantism, right, it's an oversimplification, right? Okay. If you talk to Protestants about, theology, and they always say, well, we just need to get to the bare bones gospel message. And it's kind of that same thing. How do we reduce this to the simplest bottom definition? Yes. I don't know if anyone's noticed, but reality is pretty complicated. Like there's a lot going on. And so even if we say, okay, so Christ is the Logos, right? And everything is, the Logoi, energetic, all these things, right? That doesn't simplify how all that works and interacts with with one another in reality. And so we can't just have this super simple explanation. It could be simple in the fact that it's all in continuity, that it's all organic, but it can't just be a reduction. And that's the problem with the Protestant worldview and their view of nationalism, is that it's an oversimplification of the nation, politics, the world that we live in, the spiritual and metaphysical reality which undergird it. So
great new sponsor, tigerfitness.com/counterflow. That's your code to get in, support my podcast, and fuel your resistance. We all talk about standing up to people, standing up to the man, all of these things. Well, you can't do it when you're a couch potato. And let's face it, it's not vanity. It's taking care of your body, your soul, your mind. All of these things. Tiger Fitness provides high-quality supplements and training gear to keep you strong, independent, and ready for whatever comes next. Again, no weak bodies, no weak minds. At Tiger Fitness, they're our kind of people. They reject corporate poison. They skip the junk peddled by big box brands and pharma-backed fitness scams. Tiger Fitness is built for those who take control of their own health and strength. I think that's you. I think that's me. I think that's all of us, guys. Self-sufficiency starts with strength. The state, the bad guys, the evil spirits, they want you weak, tired, and dependent. Tiger Fitness helps you break free by optimizing your performance and resilience. Again, you can support a business that is supporting me, supporting this podcast, and it stands for you. No woke BS, no corporate virtue signaling, all of the stuff that we hate, these guys hate as well. And so they are not like that. When you want to get in shape, they've got workouts on this website. They've got a lot of supplements, great energy drinks, all of these things that I'm kind of a part of most days of my life. It's for serious people who value discipline, taking care of your own, your family, and your body, self-reliance, and all of these things. tigerfitness.com/counterflow. Can you, I think something that will help people grasp this in an orthodox, from an orthodox view, let's say through that lens, can you compare and contrast America with, let's say, Constantinople or the Byzantine Empire and discuss what we call Symphonia?
Yeah. To start, there are some overlapping things, right? Because both, kind of try to draw, Constantinople much more so, but even Western society tries to kind of grow out of this Roman inheritance, right? This idea of res publica, right? The republic, our people and system. And in the way that it's developed in the West, right, the republic today, in kind of a post-enlightenment way, is right, okay, you go, you vote, you have representatives, they make all the decisions. If you don't like it, you vote for a new person. The church is completely separate. Your religious views should not really be involved. In the Byzantine, Serbian, Russian Orthodox tradition, it's set up a little differently. You look at the Byzantine Empire, and again, it's kind of embodied in the double-headed eagle, which is res publica, right? The nation, the people, with two heads, right? The church and the state. And each of them have a crown because they are both ruling on earth, right? But under the crown of Christ, right? Both have a ministry to play in society. And so if you are thinking through this, again, modern system, right? You can't have that. You can only have that in a society which understands itself as an organic whole, in which the people are, at the end of the day, both the church and the state, both the polity and the ecclesia. And that's really the difference. And we see this play out in a number of different ways throughout time. One is obviously the coronation of emperors, right? And so the emperors in Constantinople, they receive the mitre, the crown. They're also given a bag of dirt to remind them, right, that in the end, you too will die and go to the grave and be accountable to God. Most of them had, obviously, their spiritual father would be the patriarch or, another respected cleric. And anytime you really see a Byzantine emperor who is pushing for the ideal of Symphonia, they would begin to elevate the monks, right? They would fund monasteries. They would bring these renowned elders into the capital to advise them, to exhort them. And anytime you see a leader who's getting away from that, they would persecute the monastery and the monastics, because monastics and, fools for Christ are really they're the prophetic voice of society. And they play this prophetic role and are there to call society and the government to repentance. Obviously, in the modern sense, there's no role for that. There is no prophetic voice. Mm-hmm. And you see that in Protestantism, right? Like, prophecy for them is, oh, I've got a word from the Lord. You're going to do good things for Jesus, right? It's nothing more than that. And it doesn't have a role in the public square the way that it did in Byzantium and Russia. Particularly in Russia, you have this beautiful tradition of holy fools, right? Who were kind of wandering, kind of crazy, super pious people, right? Who had the gift of clairvoyance. And you have like St. Basil the Blessed, for example, who goes to Ivan the Terrible, right? After he basically, burns all these cities to the ground. And he brings him a piece of raw meat. And he says, eat. And the Tsar says, it's a fasting day. I can't eat that. And he says, well, then why do you feast on the flesh of your brethren?
Mm.
And so that was a call to repentance. And anyone else say that to Ivan the Terrible probably would have gotten their head cut off, right? But because he was this holy man who stood outside of society, as the prophets do, he could get away with that.
Well, our leader, if that's what Donald Trump could be considered, our president, has had some discussions with some spiritual types. What were your thoughts with his meeting and his public appearance with Archbishop Elpidophoros?
Ooh, I think on one hand, right, it's kind of nice to see Elpidophoros say something good about Trump and kind of push back, but I really think it just comes from a place of desperation. I know he's highly unpopular in the Fanar. Most of the bishops don't like him. Many of them have called for his resignation. So is the Greek government. Outside of Go Arch in America, he's not looked on super favorably. And Bartholomew is making a special trip to America this year, first time in 4 years, right, to bolster Elpidophoros' role and to gain new allies in Washington because they don't have any right now. Now, from what I understand, the Constantine comment was not in his speech. He did that off the cuff. And the purpose, right, was to flatter Trump, right, to gain favor with Trump. So I think on the one hand, it's a positive thing. On the other hand, I think we remain cautious because at the end of the day, he loves the Fanar. He wants Constantinople to survive. And granted, for all my issues with Constantinople, they are in a very precarious situation. And so he's going to do whatever he has to become patriarch and preserve the patriarchate.
Do you know much about, again, we talked about it last week with Father John Whiteford, but it is a voice in Trump's ear. She is. Do you know much about this Paula White lady?
So I know she's part of this new Apostolic Reformation group, which is like a super charismatic loony group who basically thinks that they have apostolic power and authority.
Oh, okay. I didn't know this.
So some of their pastors have said, well, if Pastor John here wants to write a gospel, he can, and you have to accept it as canon. I mean, they're that crazy.
That's getting to Joseph Smith Mormonism type of levels at that point.
Yeah, they're nutty, and she's nutty. She's obviously been divorced several times, which, in our society is not super uncommon. Of course, you'd hope that a prominent pastor wouldn't be in that situation, especially not having affairs with other well-known pastors. She had a big affair with Benny Hinn and was filmed leaving a hotel in Rome with him hand in hand, all. And that's just crazy. If one of our clergy did that, they certainly wouldn't be clergy anymore.
Right.
And it just reveals this loss of standards that that charismaticism leads to, because it's all based on this supposition that, well, if you have spiritual gifts, therefore you're blessed by God.
Once a month, my supporters of this show and myself and a special guest have a Zoom meeting. It's not recorded, it's not posted, it's just private. It's between you guys, the guest, and myself. I do this because it means a lot for you guys who support me by showing me that this show means a lot to you. I love talking with you. I look at it as like a benefit for people that support the show, but it's really a benefit for me. I get to know you guys and have an off-the-record discussion with our guest, and, sometimes topics you don't want to necessarily have all the ins and outs discussed online, if you know what I mean. So to be in this group, please go to patreon.com/counterflow and donate $5 or more per month. And it gets you in this club. We do it once a month. It's a great time. It's great people. They're all smarter than me. So that's an upgrade from what you're used to. I can tell you that. The guests are always guests that people want to hear from. A lot of you guys will be familiar with many of the guests. Father Turbo's done it. Father Deacon Ananias has done it. David Patrick Carey's done it. My own priest, Father Ignatius, has done it. Father Moses McPherson's done it. It's a very good time, and I think you guys would enjoy it. If you love this content, please go to patreon.com/counterflow, $5 or more per month. Thank you. Okay, I'm assuming then, I mean, if she's hanging or was hanging with Benny Hinn, we're talking the sort of hitting the forehead and people falling down sort of charismatic stuff.
Yeah, the Holy Spirit machine gun stuff. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Are there competing issues between Christian nationalism as we see it at this point in Orthodoxy?
I think there's a competing worldview for sure.
Okay.
I think in terms of political interests, I think, we've really seen a number come to the fore. On the Christian nationalist side, they're, well, not all of them, right? But a lot of the super patriot evangelicals, right, are obviously, very supportive of Ukraine, very supportive of certain other states where we might think that, they should be criticized a little more. You see this, it's very much a toe the line kind of position. And our morality just won't let us do that, right? Good is good, bad is bad. And so we have to stand for that, whether it's, someone we support or someone we dislike. And I think that's really what it comes down to.
I'm trying to sort through the title, if you will, the descriptor of America First, as I'm trying to do with Christian nationalism, because it's like, okay, I get Tucker Carlson, he's America First. Absolutely get everything he says, totally understand it. And then you see some that I think would call themselves that, and they still want foreign entitlements and money, tax dollars given foreign aid to Israel or Ukraine. And I suppose the rationale would be, well, America First means our allies too. I've never asked someone who believes that, because I guess they wouldn't be on this show. But what are your thoughts on that sort of weird dichotomy? And you're in and around politics all the time. So I assume you might talk to people that would call themselves Christian nationalists or America First that are yet also for money going to other countries. Do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly see that all throughout the party. I think it's, America First, but only so far in many cases. Okay. And again, it goes back to the theological supposition of, Israel being the chosen people. Therefore they need to be supported, right? Russia, Soviet, atheist, therefore we must oppose them. And to the credit of Ukraine and Israel, they have very effective public messaging, propaganda, whatever you want to call it. Yes. And, most people, they're not going to challenge their own suppositions and the prevailing narratives to take a more nuanced approach. I'm not necessarily against, people supporting Ukraine as long as they're willing to own the things that Ukraine does. On the flip side, there is kind of this hypocrisy of America First, except.
Yeah.
And you really see this last 10 years, there's this big redefinition of terms that's been going on. You see this with the idea of democracy, right? Democracy used to be the people, right? And the will of the people. Now it's the will of the institution. And you kind of see the same thing with America First, right? That certain interests have crept in and say, oh no, it's America First to support this. And because they have a lot of money and sway with the establishment, who in many ways is just going along for the America First ride, right? They're oh yeah, that's perfectly fine. So I think at the end of the day, we're still a minority, and so we kind of have to recognize how that is impacting the narrative and platform.
Who are the people that are a net positive in Trump's orbit, do you think?
Well, I definitely think Vance. And there's certainly things you can criticize Vance for. But him being a, traditional Catholic who's trying to continue to push the envelope towards the right and towards a more traditional Christian framework, I think is a good thing. Same with Tucker. Yes. Beyond that, I mean, I think it's kind of hard to say. I think that we've all been pretty disappointed with a lot of the people who are around Trump, which I think we were always kind of hesitant, right? Like hopefully optimistic, but also cautious. And I think that was the right position to take, because I do think there's been quite a few things where you really would have hoped there would have been a little bit more. And not all of those appointments and people around him have been as great as we had hoped. So
I have a problem with this, and boy, I know in the comments I'm going to get hit on for this, but. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see J.D. Vance as a Zionist. And I'm the last one to give someone a pass on something like that. But I keep seeing, I almost feel like that's like in our circles, that term gets thrown around like racism does on the left, where it's like, oh, Zionist. And I'm like, I don't, trust me, there's a lot of it, but I don't see it with him. What do you think about that?
Yeah, again, I think he's much more balanced and rational. You even see this with the Yemen stuff. Everyone was ready to go. Everyone was ready to bomb Yemen. He's like, hey guys, don't you think it'd be better to hold off a bit? Maybe tell the American people why this is a good idea, then do it, not just bomb them and hope that they approve of it. And I think the same kind of goes with Israel. He's supportive. But not to the point we see with a lot of people where any criticism whatsoever is just anathema. That he doesn't strike me as that. I think he's certainly, and I've made this distinction before, he's certainly supportive of Israel's right to self-determination, as am I. But he makes a distinction between that and the neo-Zionism, right, that is really prevalent in Israeli politics right now. This very hard line view that I think is, in many ways a result of so many years of war and violence. Those things dehumanize you. And I think we are seeing the effects of that on Israeli society, and we should pray that they overcome that. But I think that he isn't just unequivocally supportive of everything that they do and everything that they ask for. I think Trump is the opposite right now. So,
okay. It feels as though taking that side, the state of Israel side, no matter what, is becoming a less and less popular. In fact, I would say it's starting to hurt people's popularity. Maybe I'm in a bubble. I don't know. But I wanted to ask you, I asked Father John this last week, this dispensational Protestantism, support Israel no matter what, the quote unquote chosen people narrative, that feels to me like it's dying out, because as with a lot of things, like the last 5 to 10 years, this has been this sort of emperor has no clothes moments, this sort of age of revelation, and things that are built falsely on like a house of cards, if you will, start to crumble. And I don't think a house of cards can be rebuilt. This certainly is one to me. Does it seem to be? It's not crumbling as fast as, let's say, the stuff with COVID did, but does it seem like that's crumbling to you?
Well, certainly if you look at polling, for the first time in generations, the majority of conservatives under 30 are not supportive of Israel.
Okay.
Now, I will say those who are supportive are even more supportive now because of that. And, I've kind of run into this recently where, I've tried to make thoughtful criticisms of things that Israel has done. And that has been met with, well, you are an anti-Semite. And it's like, well, no. My sister-in-law and niece, right? My brother, I was married a Jewish girl, right? My niece is Jewish. I myself spent a year in synagogue trying to join the IDF after the 2014 Gaza war. Couldn't deny Christ, therefore couldn't become a Jew. But
did they ask you to do that, by the way? Do they ask you to do that?
Well, he probably wouldn't have, but he knew that my dad was a Pentecostal charismatic pastor. And he kind of asked how my dad felt about that. And I tried to shoo off the question. And he was like, well, do you believe that Jesus is God? And I was like, oh, yes. So, I thought, hey, 3 armies in a lifetime, probably a movie deal.
Yeah. And they disallowed you because of that?
Yeah. Well,
I did not know this.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, fair enough. I mean, it seems obvious. There's people like, what are you, an idiot, Buck? But I never thought that deep into it. Like, I actually know an IDF guy, or a former IDF guy, who's a paramedic at my station. I need to ask him.
Well, so there's this weird thing where like Messianic Jews, if their mother, right, or some other connection, right, was Jewish, not in the Messianic sense, they still get birthright. But as a convert, that doesn't happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Okay.
But to the point, I've never had a problem with Jewish people. I know people say, oh, the Talmud says this, Talmud says I don't care, frankly. I know who Christ is, right? I glorify him. They can do what they want. And most Jews who I've known throughout my life were good and upright people. And a thing I want to point out is in that synagogue, questions of what Israel was doing in Gaza and elsewhere came up, and many of them took a very nuanced approach to it. Evangelicals right now will not take a nuanced approach. And
Correct.
I was talking to a Jewish acquaintance of mine kind of about some of, what I've been dealing with lately. And he said, look, I don't think you're an anti-Semite. He's like, but you also have to understand that right now, because attacks and, hate and all this, because they're up, evangelicals in particular are kind of overreacting, overcorrecting, want to protect, friends, right, who are Jewish. And like this guy who's, wonderful guy, does a lot for the party. He, he's received death threats and all kind of things for what's going on in Israel from, people who were lunatics. And, he's had court cases battling this stuff. He's going through some stuff legitimately. And so friends of his who are evangelical are particularly sensitive about criticism of Israel right now. And, that's just the reality of the situation. I think that we have to have honest conversations about what's going on without it being crass.
Yes.
Right. I think we should, like, Father Thomas Hopkins says, right? You have to speak the truth in love. And I think that's the struggle with the conversation because of where it's at right now, but what we have to try to do regardless. I don't think it helps to shout from the rooftops everything that Israel does bad. I also don't think it helps to be silent about it. I think we have to have honest conversations. Because at the end of the day, right, if you are, a Christian Zionist, this is going to help Israel to fulfill that position that you believe they're in as this righteous nation, right? If they're going to be a righteous nation, they have to act righteously. So,
yes. Did you see? I was not going to bring this up, but it is all the rage at the moment. I suppose it still will be when this drops in a couple of days. The discussion on Joe Rogan between Dave Smith and Douglas Murray.
I did not see that. I'll have to watch it. But
okay, it's fascinating. Douglas Murray represents. Well, first of all, his first 45 minutes of what I suppose he was entering into what he thought was a debate or an argument were based on an appeal to authority, a logical fallacy. So it's like, I know, I feel like I've watched enough Jay Dyer to when someone starts doing that, it's like, why doesn't Joe cut him off? He can't do this. But he was attacking them for saying, why do you guys talk about Israel and Palestine? Because you're not experts on it. You're not a historian. Daryl Cooper, Martyr Made, he's not a historian, so he can't. It's like, bro, the logical fallacy was hilarious. Then I'll let you watch. It's a fascinating thing. It felt to me that Murray represented this sort of dying boomer worldview that he's with all he can to latch on to something as he's falling, about to go down a waterfall. He's grasping at twigs and sticks to try to save himself. Felt like that to me. I'll let the people watching this decide what they thought about it. But I do know something that you are familiar with, and I would be remiss if I didn't get to this part with you. What is happening now in Ukraine? Let me ask you about that blow up in the Oval Office with Zelensky. What were your thoughts on that, first of all?
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing with the blow up in the Oval Office is, since the start of the war, what Zelensky has done is he has gone to Western leaders, asked for something, and they've said, no, that could push us to war with Russia. And so what he's done is go straight to the media and say, well, we need this to win the war, and they will not give it. If they will not give it, we cannot win war, right? And so then there's this public pressure on Western governments to give him these things. So he basically gaslights governments to get what he wants. He came to America not liking the mineral deal and thinking that he could gaslight Trump in front of the American people and get away with it. Trump's not Biden.
Right.
And so he started doing his little thing, pulling out his pictures of, supposed prisoners. And Vance said, hey, this is wildly inappropriate. And he tried to push back, and then Trump got involved. And I think it was necessary. And while it hasn't quite borne the fruit that I hoped it would, it has been a positive thing and has shown, right, that Trump and Vance can't just be bent over and forced to do whatever a dictator overseas wants them to do.
Right. If there are any haters watching this, they're going to say, well, that's exactly what they do with Putin.
Name one thing.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. I'm just saying I can already hear the pushback.
I mean, if they can name one thing, I'd be happy to hear it. Trump is a negotiator, right? He went to Putin and he said, hey, what do you want and what can you live with? He went to Zelensky, what do you want and what can you live with? And Zelensky just said what he wanted. He said, no, what can you live with, right? Zelensky doesn't want to give that up. And the reason is, if he doesn't get everything he wants, he's gone. He's gone overnight. And so he really has to fight. I mean, many people don't know this, but right after that big blow up, there was a call to impeach Zelensky in the Rada in Ukraine.
Yes.
Because they see that his leadership's failed. And that convinced him to give in enough for that Black Sea deal to happen. And so, and a couple other, minor, de-escalations, which have, been violated constantly since, but it shows that there is some movement,
And what is the movement over there? Obviously we all hope for a peace deal. Is it realistic? What's the time frame in your estimation? And I want to get to what is happening with the real church over there as well.
Cool. I kind of shrink from making predictions, only because I thought the war would be over by now. But it's not.
Yeah, fair.
But I think Russia will continue to gain ground. I think Ukraine will continue to struggle. I think if they can convince European nations to send troops, and that really escalates things. And I think that we need to find a way to prevent that from happening. But they can only fight this war for so long. And there's so much resentment in Ukraine right now. There's so much division. They can only fight this war for so long. It's a war of attrition. And Russia has it dialed into a science. That's just the reality. And they can outproduce them with artillery, drones, tanks, manpower, money. Ukraine's on life support. And if we really care about Ukraine, then we need to seek peace. Give Russia the lands that it is codified in its constitution. So you don't have to lose another 500,000 boys and men just to lose it.
Mm-hmm.
Let it go. And then work on healing your country. Like the country is in absolute turmoil. And I just don't understand these people in America and Western Europe who just want to keep fighting this war, the last Ukrainian. It's easy to support a war when you're not doing the dying.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely.
if you support the war in Ukraine, you're watching this, buy a plane ticket. Buy a plane ticket to Kyiv, join up with the International Legion, and put your money where your mouth is. Like many
they will allow that.
Positions.
Yes, they will allow you to do that if you're watching this.
Go on.
Yes. There's a handful of houses now. Whatever the local Democratic Party must be here in Lockhart, clearly they have had a meeting and said, if you're in our party, put a Ukraine flag up. Because while there's not that many relative to the population, and the last election, every Democrat here lost. So it's red, but it still stands out when it's like, okay, someone had an idea, I get it. But I don't think any of them are going up there. It's interesting. I should knock on their door and ask, like, has the man of the house left here? If there is a man of the house. That's a assumption that might not be the case anyway.
Yeah.
Back to this, and you've written about it. I want to get some more thoughts from you on this. What does this Orthodox American patriotism look like? Because we have done a lot of the nationalist talk, because you and I have spoken before around the election time. I don't know. People are talking to my priest has told me, other priests, if people should vote. Does this mean, what's my duty as, I'll ask you, Ben, what's my duty as an Orthodox American patriot?
Well, to start, as an Orthodox Christian, you can't run, you can't hide. You can't say, well, screw it, I'm going to go start a commune, forget society. Again, just as the faithful Russians fought in the Second World War, right? Not for the communists, but for their country, right? This is our country. We were brought up from its soil, its culture, and it's our job to convert it. And so, a lot of people say, oh, well, our rulers are this and that. But it's like St. Paisius said. He said, there's a disease that's in every olive tree. But we need olive trees. We need olive oil. And so you find the trees that are less infected and you harvest from them. And that was regarding politics, right? People say, oh, well, Greece is, at least nominally an Orthodox country. Okay. Well, I will raise you then the testimony of Elder Ephraim of Arizona, who said regarding the Obama-McCain election, look, they both have horns. Vote for the one with the smaller horns. At the end of the day,
that's a tough one.
We are trying to steer our country away from the abyss. We've been in a nosedive. Trump has got us a little bit off course. Every person we vote for is a little better. Every time we write an op-ed about what they're doing wrong, every time we righteously criticize them, every time we organize to put up better candidates, we are moving that nosedive off course and back up to a climb. And that is the goal.
Does there seem like a grace period right now, or some breathing room compared to where things could have been?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think that had Trump not won, this crazy techno security state would have just clamped down even harder. I think Musk would have been destroyed, thrown in prison, his assets stripped. I think everyone who supported Trump would have been. We might not be on this podcast right now, you and me.
That's fair. Yes. Yeah. I remember seeing, I think like Tucker and Elon were speaking on some platform, might have been Tucker's show or something, or a live thing. Whatever the case was, I think Elon didn't realize they were recording. And they basically said if he was going all in for Trump, because if Trump lost, they'd both be arrested. To which Tucker said, yeah, I agree. And then he said something like, so are we recording it? He's like, yeah, now. Oh, well, that got out there. So it was interesting that he said it thinking he was not even being recorded, and basically like, I know I'm dead meat if he doesn't win this.
Yeah.
Sad to think that in this country that would have been a possibility. Not even just fanboying on Elon. I mean, just that's a law-abiding American would have to worry that he's going to be locked up like a political prisoner just because he's got a large platform.
And that's why it's necessary for us all to be involved.
Yes.
You know, we can't just let the crazies run it, whether they're on the left or the right. We need Orthodox people with an Orthodox worldview who understand the church's political theology, who have a sound Orthodox moral compass, who can discern the will of God, right? Which is essentially what the scriptures and liturgy and all this is for, so that we can go out and convert the country and convert the world. We have to be involved to make that happen.
And how is the church, the true church, doing at this moment in Ukraine from what your understanding is?
Struggling.
Okay.
Now, you know, the faithful, you know, these folks are rock solid. You know, so many of them are confessors. There's unfortunately been many martyrs, right? But they are true zealots of piety who are fighting to preserve the church. Unfortunately, now that the word is really getting out about what's going on, it's less easy, right, for the schismatics in the state to continue doing what they're doing. Now, they're doing it anyways, but there's more challenges. Right now, their faces are on news reports, right? And so that's also why it's important for people to go to uoj.news. And when these articles pop up showing, right, hey, they attempted to seize this church. Here's a schismatic cleric who led the raid, right? Share those things. Get them out to your circle so that people see them. Write your congressman. Ask him what he thinks about it. Why hasn't he commented on this? Right? Send it out to local news agencies. Why aren't you talking about this? Do you not see what's going on? This is what we're supporting. Right? The more that we are active in getting the truth out, the quicker that Zelensky and the schismatics and the Banderites will have to face justice.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge for us is, for one, your average American doesn't even know what Orthodoxy is for the most part. And two, then you're really getting into the weeds for a normal person when you're talking about a schismatic, like one's UOC, one's UCO or whatever. They're, you know, it's like, I think a lot of Americans are like, what? I don't get it. There's some churches that don't like each other. But I think if the understanding gets out there that it's like the United States State Department funding a fake church, shutting down a real church that's 1,000 years old or more. I've been trying to mentally kind of role play like words that have an impact as to not just the average American closes their eyes as you're trying to explain this to them. Is that part of your challenge in reporting on some of this?
Yeah. I think when you're talking to most Americans because they just don't understand it, doing it in those basic terms is helpful. The problem is that the schismatics, right, have the Ukrainian propaganda apparatus at their disposal. And so then they push these counter narratives. Oh, well, you know, there's a little more nuance to that. Da, da, da. So then you kind of have to get into the weeds.
Yes.
And so it's important for Orthodox Christians to share this with friends and family who aren't Orthodox and explain to them in a more intimate setting what's going on so that they can then understand and talk about it in a more educated way. Unfortunately, not as many Orthodox Christians are talking about this as you would imagine, right? You would think this would be a big deal to everybody. But a lot of people just don't want to be bothered, you know, even in, you know, I think in ROCOR, a lot of people are willing to speak about it, but at the same time, there's this view that, oh, well, because they're the Russian church, of course they're going to say that. We need the OCA to be more vocal. We need the Antiochians to be more vocal. We need the Serbians to, granted, a lot of the Serbians are very outspoken, but we need everyone to be more outspoken about this. Because otherwise it just looks like, you know, the Russian church doing the Russian church's thing. this is the truth, regardless of what church you come from. This is happening. There are hundreds of hours of video, thousands of temples being seized, thousands of believers being beaten. This is a tragedy. In a village in Bukovina, a church, they raided it. The believers were, the faithful were able to get it back, but they desecrated the altar while they were in there.
Yeah.
They desecrated the reserved sacraments, led by a schismatic priest. I mean, what more evidence do you need that these people are not Christian?
Right. Last thing, only because it's timely, I want you to close on some of your thoughts. I was going to ask this, but you're wise. You can give us some thoughts on Great Lent, not even specifically this one, as your wife sits with the injured back and maybe walking with a cane. Just Lent, broadly speaking, and what it represents to us in the church.
I think Lent, for one, it's always a time where we really recommit ourselves to Christ, right? We really try to dive into repentance. Most of the time, at least in my experience, we start off really zealous. We get past the exaltation of the cross, and it starts to get a little more difficult. But it's all going, we have to remain steadfast, because here in a week, when we're enjoying Pascha, it'll all be worth it. But again, it's a time to really dwell on the power of the gospel. It's a time where we participate in the economy of Christ. I think this is something that a lot of people don't quite grasp. These services, we're not just going and remembering. The energies of God are folding time on themselves, so that we are tomorrow, right? Or today, Lazarus Saturday, we are really at the tomb as Lazarus is risen. Tomorrow, we will really be with the people as Christ enters into Jerusalem. We will really watch him be betrayed. We will really watch him ascend the cross, take him off and place him in the tomb. And then we will come and find the tomb empty and know that Christ is risen. And this needs to be our focus. This needs to be what we commit ourselves to and remain steadfast in our fast, in our ascetic struggle towards this moment.
Amen. All right. UOJ.news. Let's do some plugs. Make sure I got that correct. I got a link to that in the show notes page. We'll really plug anything you'd like. Oh, boy, would Jim and Rebecca and Clark Carlton kill me if we don't, and your father-in-law. How did I forget to ask you about Ludwell? What's going on with Ludwell?
Yeah, so, right now, Rebecca is stepping away. She has a lot going on, a lot of other obligations. Rebecca has really been the force that has allowed me to do anything with Ludwell. She's kind of like the bird on my shoulder that keeps chirping, reminding me, this needs to be done, this needs to be done. And so with her departure, we need volunteers, right? People who are willing to help with the website, with social media, with events. We need people to volunteer. And so we are also, obviously kicking up our efforts to lock in a location for this year's conference. So if you or your parish would be interested in hosting, reach out. I'll give Buck the email so he can put it in the show notes. But we're going to keep rocking and rolling. We're getting a podcast fired up, hosted by the wonderful Buck Johnson. And so a lot of our conference speeches will be released through there, and then follow-up interviews with speakers. So I think it's going to be really exciting.
Yes, as do I. What's the website they can go to for that information?
southernorthodox.org.
Excellent. Now, back to plugging anything else you'd like.
Yeah, you can, if you want good Orthodox news to know what's going on both in all the churches in America and overseas, go to uoj.news. We have bureaus in 8 different countries, including on Mount Athos.
Wow.
Yeah, we just started it up about a week ago. And so if
do you know through what monastery over there it's through? Do you know?
Say again?
Do you know which monastery it's through over there?
I do not. I'd have to ask our folks in the main branch. But it is monastics on Athos who run it. And so if you want local news on local events in the church around the world, uoj.news is your place to get it. You can follow me on Substack at Where the Wasteland Ends. And that's about it.
Very good Substack. One of my favorite ones. I forgot to link that. We'll do that as well. All right. Ben Dixon, sir, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Buck.
Next week, it's a big one. Why even try to hide it? I just want you to get excited. Jay Dyer is back with us next week. It's been quite some time. I'm so excited for you guys to hear that one. I'll be dropping a teaser clip. I might have already dropped it by the time this episode rolls out, but Jay Dyer, the man himself, will be with us. I can't wait for that. And let's see, in terms of this podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, please. We're getting up there in numbers. It's doing well, and I always appreciate your support, which you can also do through patreon.com/counterflow. I've got a guest in mind. I was waiting till after Pascha. That ought to tell you what sort of guest it will be. Priests get busy during Pascha time, Holy Week. So very quickly, this is someone I'm almost certain will say yes. I just don't want to spoil it in case he can't for some reason. It's someone who's been a guest on the show fairly recently I got a lot of great feedback on. So if you're part of that Zoom group, the Patreon group, it's coming, friends, very quickly here now that Pascha's done. Follow me on X at BuckRebel, BuckRebel. And let's see, I think that's all we got for this week. Stay tuned. Next week, Jay Dyer back on the show. You guys have a good one.
Like the sound of the Counterflow Podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.
This has been